What's going on, everybody? I am doing a little ambient lighting project for my Model Y that do not have them in the door pockets. I know some of the refreshed units have the functionality built in, but mine doesn't, so I'm making it happen for myself. So I'm on the rear because the rears are going to be treated a bit differently. My want was to tap into the footwell lights and run wire so it functions completely like OEM with bright when parked and then dim to half power when driving. But the rear is not quite the same as the front because the connection point right there is actually a plug instead of just a harness running through that. So that kind of made the whole plan for the back change. So what I'm doing is tapping into the window switch. There's 3 wires. I'll show you all when I've got the door panel apart. Ground, one for window power, and then one for the window switch light. The window switch light is actually pretty dim, so it ends up working out. This will be an always on because these are always on, but it shouldn't have any issues with lifespan. I mean, these are supposed to function forever. Now these are not OEM, so we'll have to see how they hold up. But to take the door panel off is relatively easy on the rear. There are 2 T25 Torx bits in the lower and then in the upper part of the door handle, and then it just pops out. So for the supplies for this project, not too much needed to make it happen. I already had a bunch of it on hand from previous projects, but what I ended up buying was some of the connectors. These make it really simple to make this project happen. But you do want to have some extension wire. This is 24 gauge. These are pre-wired 3mm flat top LEDs. They do a pretty good job at ambient lighting at 12 volt. What I'm going to do on these is also sand the top a little bit so that it gives you a bit more of a frosted appearance for just additional light disbursement. Not sure what the camera's trying to accomplish, but obviously not focus. Some LED holders. You end up drilling a hole into the panel you want this installed, and this holds the LED into place. This is a T connector where you run your original wires to the top and then your tap wires, or the wires that you're tapping from these into this bottom. This is actually really useful. They make this project so much easier compared to having to take insulation off the OEM harness and then using electrical tape to try and doctor that up. And then these connectors are just click-in connectors. So one side would end up going to the LED and the other side to the leading wire. And they just click together. It makes it easy if something fails. You can undo it, unclick it, and just replace it. And then I also bought some felt tape to make this look as clean and OEM as possible. I had a knife from, or a blade knife from wrapping before also. This comes in handy to slice some things and also help take some of the insulation off to get a little bit better contact. I'm going to take the door panel off and then show what's behind it. So once those T25 bits are taken out down here in the door handle, you just find yourself a gap and pop the rest of the poppers loose, and then you're able to lift away the door panel by just gently pulling up, and the door panel comes away from the actual door. Let me reposition myself, and then I'm going to get everything together for where we're going to be tapping. So with the door panel I would definitely say on a blanket. I've got a nice little duck blanket that's helping protect some of the plastics. The part of the harness that we're going to be tapping into, and just for reference, this comes out of the door, which of course is in that harness that I had mentioned, and then runs down and then splits into three: speaker, door switch, and then window switch. You could essentially tap either of these if you are going to go this route. I just ended up deciding on the window switch because it is the closest to where we are going to end up routing the wire through for the LED. So what we end up doing is taking this connector apart by first taking it out of the holder, and you'll need to take a small flathead and pry it into this little dead space so that this connection can get enough leeway so this can be popped out. So I'm going to take care of that and then get everything else prepped. Okay, so I took that small flathead and got enough of that leeway I mentioned to be able to pop these loose, and then I used my blade of choice to carefully slice away some of the original felt tape that was around these wires so that I have enough room to tap with that T-tap. So the three wires that we are going to be working with is this black, brown, and tan wire. The birds are just having a sing along today. And the ones that we're going to be tapping into with our T-tap is going to be black for negative and then dark brown or brown for positive. The tan or light brown wire is the power for the window, where the light brown is power for the switch's light. If you want to have a brighter door pocket, then go with the light brown. I decided to stick with light brown because, again, OEM function on the other ambient lighting is for it to dim to about 50% of what the actual output is for driving. So make your choice and tap away. So bringing in the T-tap, end up opening it up, and there's little clips in there that hold everything together, and then push it around the wires. There's essentially tiny little blades in there that push to the insulation and provide just enough contact to get that power source running through this, and then it runs through the other side once you put your other wires in there. But just make sure to use some needle noses to click this in place so it actually has a good secure connection. So I'm going to take care of that and get everything else prepped and kind of show what it looks like once everything is almost ready to go. So just quickly showing what it looks like inside of that T-tap once you have your wires routed through. All that's left to do is just to push it down with that needle nose just to get that connection. And then I would definitely test. Once you have that together, I'll kind of show how I do that. Test and make sure you've got power before you move on. So I have my T-tap in the background, and all of the LEDs come with little wire leads, so it's easy to test before you go and put everything together and then get to the end and then you don't have power. So stick it into the T-tap and then just take your other lead and put it into the other power source. And you're just looking for some form of light. It doesn't have to be as powerful as it may or may not be, but just something to show that there's actually power flowing through your connection. So just stick it into its little slot. And you are looking for just a little bit of power. This is of course just white, it is not blue, but camera's making it look very blue.
but looks like we're good to go with power.
Okay, so the tap circuit is complete. Again, T-tap that runs into the window switch wires. Here is that really helpful, useful connection that I had mentioned before, where you can just put your two wire leads in there and click them together. They can be undone if something fails. And then here is our final product with our LED. This is before sanding it to get it to be a bit more diffuse. You can kind of see how it's just really just focused in the middle, even though it does still diffuse. I'll show what it looks like once it's sanded just a little bit, so that that diffusion is just a bit more apparent. Okay, so here the diffusion technique is complete. I use 150 grit sandpaper. You can use something that's finer or whatever you have around. Just make sure that you don't do it too much, because the more you do it, the more actual LED plastic you take off. And you don't want too much, otherwise it's going to affect the way that the holder functions. So now I need to wrap this in felt to make it look really nice and clean, and then I'll take off the part of the door panel that I'm actually going to be drilling the hole in for this LED to sit in. So let me get all of this wrapped up, and then I'll get that part out and show where I drilled the hole. So felt tape wrap is complete. It's looking really nice, kind of like the rest of the harness. So the spot that we end up routing this through is going to be where the window switch wires lead into, which is right here. And the piece that we take off is actually the bottom of the cover, where we have one of those T25 screws. And just for reference, it sits down there. So I'm going to go and drill my hole into this panel so that I can route that LED holder through it and get this job wrapped up. Okay, so I've got my panel here staged with my trusty Hitachi. And the drill bit that I end up using for this that makes the most sense is going to be a 13/64. You can start with a 3/16, but it ends up being a little bit too small of a hole, so you end up having to drill the 13/16 anyway. But just make sure that when you do drill with that bit, that is just a clean drill. Do not sit there and try and make the hole bigger with that drill bit, because then it becomes too big. So let me get this drilled and we'll be right back. Okay, so the holder's hole is drilled. Just pick wherever you think is best. For me, this kind of curves up and I want to light up the door pocket, so I found the best spot after kind of testing a bit with a 9-volt battery to see where it's going to make the most sense, which ends up being right here, right in the middle, and it ends up lighting up the spot really, really good. So now it's just for routing the pre-wired LED through here, followed by putting the holder on the other side and then pushing everything back together. So I will get all that taken care of and then show what the final result looks like before I snap this in place and put the door panel back in place. And then we'll be all wrapped up. So I just did a quick temp hang of the door panel to show what this looks like. So I routed the wire through the hole that we drilled. And then of course, on the other hand, here is our LED holder, which will snap around our LED, and then we'll push it back through the panel so that it sits nice and flush, and then snap everything back together and put everything back together. So let me get this on there, and then we'll show what the final result is once we've pushed everything back. And it's really just clips right here that kind of slide in and then it clicks in. And what holds this panel in place mostly is a few pop clips, and then also finally that T25 screw that holds the whole door panel in. So let me get this wrapped up, and then we should be able to get the door back together afterwards. final result with the door panel installed, sitting inside the car with the garage closed. So, for reference, here we go, down to the door pocket. Looks like there's a tiny bit of reflection right here on the seat, but that'll be okay. But it is very, very subtle, and it looks very nice. It's almost like you can't even see it, but it's right down there. Looks very, very clean, very integrated. This is, of course, that half power that I had mentioned that it's getting from the window switch. As an example, just to compare, I have a tapped LED in the center console that gets power from the main ambient lights, which is full power when it's parked. So I'm going to move my hand over here to show what it looks like in comparison. So, a lot brighter automatically, but this will dim to be about the same intensity as the door pockets that'll be always on. So I think it'll be a good match for nighttime drives. So there you have it, tutorial on how to DIY your own ambient lighting for the rears with the way that the plug is on the B pillars. But this ends up looking very, very, very clean. And I'm looking forward to a nighttime drive to see how this will all pan out. Hope this was helpful. And if anybody has any questions, just send me a message.